my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to a new reading vlog. In this video I read 4 new book releases. I think it was 4 from January up until March for the first quarter of the year. I plan to do one of these videos for every quarter and just read the new releases on my TBR as they come out. So there may be books in here that you've already previously seen me talk about either on Goodreads or in my monthly wrap up on this channel. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video. Hi, I am halfway through the Tusks of Extinction now. First of all, we need to talk about how tiny this book is. I guess when I added it to my TBR, I didn't look at the page count for it, so I was very surprised when I went to the library and this was waiting for me. It is 98 pages. It's not even 100 pages. Not including the acknowledgements. So I was a little bit nervous at first because I was just under the impression that this was going to be a full-length novel. So when I saw that it was so short, I was very, even more curious about the story of it and how it all was going to come together in such a short book. Like, I was worried that it wasn't going to have, the impact that I thought that it would have, but that's definitely not the case. It is very impactful so far and talking about a lot of important topics and just very interesting topics. So to start off, we are in the future and elephants have gone completely extinct due to poaching and humans basically killing them off and running them to extinction. So now we have this team of people that has decided to bring back mammoths. They somehow were able to replicate the DNA and create mammoths, and they put them out in the wild. But because mammoths have been extinct for so long and there are no other creatures similar to a mammoth on Earth anymore, they didn't really know what to do. The mammoths were just kind of lost and were just dying off because they didn't know how to survive. So we have this doctor, her name is Demira? Yes, and she was an expert on elephants. So she eventually she went through this process to have her brain uploaded to this, I don't know, future thing and then her human body dies, so they just bring her back a really long time and they bring back her consciousness. So they have to recount with her oh, you were killed on Earth because of this, blah blah blah, and then explain the situation with the elephants and the mammoths. And because she is really the only, not person, because she's not a person, the only brain or the only consciousness knowledge source for elephant life and the way that elephants interacted and survived in the wild, now they want to use her brain in order to help guide their mammoths. So the whole idea is that they upload her consciousness into this mammoth and put her out into the wild to help them navigate things. So it's very interesting because the book is jumping around in timeline. It's not a linear format. So we have flashbacks from Dr. Demira when she is going through this upload process, and then we have her waking up, and then we are also simultaneously getting scenes from her already as a mammoth. And then we also have another point of view where we are following some poachers who are actually just starting to hunt the mammoths for their tusks, because previously the mammoths had been in a protected area so that poachers wouldn't find them and recreate history, and the same thing that happened with elephants would happen with the mammoths. But now that is happening because the poachers are finding them. It is escalating very quickly so far. There has not been a dull moment, and I really appreciate that, especially if you have a book of this size. I feel like it has to get right into the action and really keep things going, which this definitely has. There have been discussions about memories, obviously a lot of discussions about the environmental impact of humans and just different animal extinctions that have occurred. For example, there's a quote that says, The problem you're trying to solve, how to bring animals back from extinction, is the wrong problem. Extinction has only one cause, and that cause is older even than the wheel. That cause is human greed. So obviously, there's a lot of commentary and a lot of different things to be brought up within the subject matter of this book, but it's definitely got that powerful impact that I was hoping it would have. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish it now, read the second half, and then I'll probably update you guys tomorrow because it is pretty late right now. So it is the next day. I am wearing the same shirt. We're not gonna address that. I did finish The Tusks of Extinction as promised. This is a book that it feels like wrong to give it anything other than a 5-star, like maybe 4.5, but I'm definitely gonna land on a 5-star. I feel like it's weird because I don't have a lot to say about it either, but it definitely set out with a specific intention and something specific that the author wanted to get across and a specific story that wanted to be told, and it accomplished that despite being short. Like, it still had that impact and said everything that it was meant to say. I feel like the writing was beautiful, the story was told in a perfect way. I really loved the ending of this as well. There is definitely some conversation in here that I feel like could be summed up just by saying eat the rich. That was literally like my thought process for a lot of the book. I was like, eat the rich. But there's this one part where they're talking about power. Power was the ability to destroy without needing to do it not out of necessity, but as an act of pure excess, to do something to someone else simply because you could. And this was perhaps the greatest power of all, to kill something that no one else could kill. Which I think was very well put. I think this book was excellent despite being so short. Like I said, it really set out to tell a certain story, and it definitely told that story, and it did so beautifully, and I would definitely recommend this if it sounds interesting to you. I'm really sad that I don't have a lot more to say about it, but one thing that did come from this is that I learned that I actually have a different book by this author on my TBR on Goodreads, so I went ahead and put it on hold at the library so I can read that next. It is called, it's actually on here, The Mountain in the Sea, and it is a much longer sci-fi book, so I'm very curious to see that one and read more from this author because this one was really good. Like, I really enjoyed it and I would highly recommend. But that's all for this book. I actually have no idea what I'm reading next because I'm literally just filming this like as these books come out and my library holds become available. So I'll see you guys when I get another book to read, and I don't know what that book will be. So I am 94 pages through Feybound, and I thought I would stop and update you guys before I forget to. Basically, so far we have these two characters. They are sisters. We have Uran and Lettel. Cats are fighting. And Uran was like this colonel in an army, and she is like her first day as colonel at the beginning of the book, and she disobeys her orders, and it ends in a large amount of casualties within the army, and she gets exiled, and she's no longer allowed to live in the Elven lands. So now she is out in this exiled land and is just trying to survive, and she wants to hunt this beast. They have these beasts in this land that they are very valuable. Their skin is used for a lot of things. Their fur is used for a lot of things, and they're basically like the holders of all the magic that the elves use. So she finds this really big one, bigger than anyone that she's ever seen, and she decides that if she kills this beast and brings back the skin and the fur, that they will allow her back in the Elven lands, because the only other time that an elf who was exiled was allowed back was when he brought like a very large quantity of this like rare valuable material. So that is Uran's plan. And then we have Lettel and I can't remember the guy's name, Rayan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of these names correctly, but Rayan is this man who was a soldier in the army, and he really respects Uran and really looks up to her and really thinks that she was a good colonel and doesn't deserve to be exiled, and then obviously Lettel, being her younger sister, is gonna go after her. So the two of them have kind of set out and have tried to find her. I've just reached the part in the book where the three of them all encounter each other, and so now they're together, and they have just encountered the Fays, which have been thought to be extinct. So basically, oh my god, I'm doing a horrible job explaining this, but like fantasy books are so hard to explain. The world that we're in, there were humans, elves, and fae, and now the humans have gone extinct and the fae have supposedly gone extinct as well, but obviously they have just encountered the fae, so they know that they're not extinct. They have just been hiding this whole time. This, I'm not sure if it is YA, but so far, like, it's reading like YA. It's very, very easy to read, which I'm really, really loving that. Sometimes fantasy is a little bit hard to get into, but I am working my way pretty quickly through this book. There have been a couple of things that were extremely predictable as well. Like, you know, this happens to me all the time, like when you're reading a book and you're like, oh, this is gonna happen, and then it happens and the characters are all shocked, and I literally like say out loud to myself, I'm like, who could have seen that coming? Like, I had a couple of those moments so far in the book, and I don't know if like the author wanted it to be that obvious, like what was gonna happen, or if I'm just like too smart. But also for that reason is why it feels like YA, because I feel like a lot of times with YA books, like they're, how do I explain it? Not like a lower level, but like generally easier to understand and predict what is going to happen when you're reading YA. But I don't know if this is YA. So anyway, that's where I am in the book. I am enjoying it so far. Like I said, it is very quick read so far, which I really, really like. I like the atmosphere. I like the incorporation of these beasts and the fact that they kind of hold all of the magic within this world. I think that is really, really interesting. The descriptions of these beasts are really, really interesting as well. So it's going well. I am very curious to see where it goes from here. Like I said, this is just the part where they have encountered the Fae, so who knows where it could go from here, but I'm excited. Alrighty, I am about 50 pages from the end of Faebound now. I'm about to go finish it, but I wanted to give you guys one more little update before I do finish it. It's going really, really well. Like, I'm really, really enjoying this. Not only the writing and just the quickness of it all, but also like the setting of it, the world that we're in, I think is so fun. I love the descriptions and just really getting to know the world a lot. This book definitely deals a lot with the politics of the world, the royals, like there's kings and queens, like a whole fae court and everything. And I think that's really, really interesting as well. Obviously, there is talk of war, especially between like the different races, like the elves versus the faes. And a lot about the history of the elves and the history of the faes and of the world in general, and the characters learning that maybe not everything that they have come to believe is true, because history gets kind of warped and changed from one person to the next telling the story, and certain things are dropped from popular phrases. So the characters are learning a lot about the truth about these things, and that maybe not everything is as they were taught, and there is not a need to be so like angry or evil or whatever towards like the faes or towards the elves, because not everything is as it seems. So that's always a really interesting element when people are starting to learn and question all the things that they were taught growing up. So this book obviously is by an author of color, but there are characters of color within the book. We have disability representation. We have a central character who has his leg amputated. He has a prosthetic leg and he uses a cane, and it's mentioned in here how that's very, very common. Obviously, a lot of the fae and a lot of the elves serve in the war, serve in the military, and it is very common to see elves or fae with missing limbs or prosthetic limbs. So I thought that was really interesting. There is LGBT element to it as well. Our main character, Yuran, is lesbian. Actually, I don't know if it's ever explicitly said that she's lesbian, but like she is very much attracted to women, and I don't think she's attracted to men. There are non-binary characters, a lot of same-sex relationships. So if all of those things are very important or things that you look for when you're reading, this is definitely a good recommendation for that. I also know that in the last clip that I talked about this, I was saying that it felt like YA, and I still do feel that way, like at least how the characters are written. Yuran is in her 30s, and then her sister Lettel is 28, I think, and they don't really seem like that age. They seem a lot younger, but I was also thinking about it, and I'm like, well, if they're like elves, then their lifespan is well over 100 years, so maybe it does make sense that they seem younger, even though for humans, like, that's not such a young age. Not that it's like old, but like, you know what I mean? But I have learned that it is definitely not YA because there were some steamy scenes, some spicy scenes. So it is not a YA book, but I still feel like the characters feel really, really young for what they're supposed to be. But overall, it's going really, really well. I feel like it's on track, honestly, to be a 4-star. We'll see where it goes in the last little bit, if it changes a lot. I'm really enjoying the magic. There are a lot of things that I would love to talk about, but they are not mentioned in the synopsis, and generally that's my rule for determining whether or not something would be a spoiler. Like if it's not in the first 50, 60 pages of the book and it's not in the synopsis, then I'm gonna say it would be a spoiler. So there is a lot that I would love to talk about because there are a lot of different elements within the world and with the magic and different things that I'm really, really enjoying. But like I said, I can't talk about them. This also is the first book in a series. I don't think anything about the other books has been revealed yet, but I'm very, very excited because I definitely know that I will go on to continue the series when those are published. So I feel like that's a really, really good sign that I am enjoying the book, just enjoying the world in general. And I'm really curious to see how it's going to end. There is enemies to lovers to sort of enemies again, maybe back to lovers type of thing. I don't know. But I'm really, really loving it. So this is going great. Anyway, I will see you guys when I finish this book. I'm gonna go sit down and finish it right now. I have finished my book. It was really, really good. I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed all of it. The way that it ended gave the perfect setup for a sequel. There were a lot of things that happened that I was not expecting. Obviously, towards the ending of books, especially fantasy books that are part of series, things escalate very, very quickly, and that did. A lot of things were happening, and I really enjoyed all of it. Like I said, it's the perfect setup for the next book, so I will definitely be picking that one up. I would say, I think this is labeled as like a fantasy romance. I would say it's definitely more fantasy than romance. Like there is romance in here, but I wouldn't call it like a romantasy. Not that I'm an expert on the genre, but there is romance in here, but it's not like a super, super huge part because a lot of it focuses on like the war and the politics of it all, like I said previously. There's a lot more that I want to say that I cannot say. I will say though, at the very end, there is this journal. Hopefully that's not spoiling anything. There's this journal, and I thought it was just something like that went along with the book to read in the end, but it's actually like the glossary. So it has the list of all the characters, different terms and things used within the book. But because it is written like a journal, there are little annotations on the pages from the characters, which I think is so fun. Even though I've already read the whole book, so I don't need the glossary, it was still kind of fun to skip through and read like the little annotations that were written by different characters. I thought that was really, really fun. The magic was really, really interesting. The world was great. The whole fairy tale vibe to it all was so good. Once again, like, I love the creatures. They're called obias. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But they play a very big part in the story. I actually just realized that there's a picture of one up here on the map, which is so funny because, like, that's pretty much exactly how I pictured it in my head. I don't know if you guys can see it. They're like giant cats with like horns and stuff. Big paws, big tails. They're so fun. But I feel like that's how you know the writing is good, the descriptions are good, because what I pictured in my head was exactly like what that illustration was. So that's a good sign. Really enjoyed this book. Definitely recommend. Like I said, I will be giving it 4 stars and will 100% be looking out for any news on the rest of the series, and we'll be picking up the next book whenever that is published, which probably will be like a year or two from now, so have to wait for that one. Love it. Hi, sorry if this angle is horrible. I literally can't see what this looks like right now. But I have my first update for Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I am 76 pages in, which is chapter 5. I don't really have a lot to say about it so far, but I will give you guys like the little rundown of the plot. So we have this world where there are humans and vampires, but vampires spelled with a Y because they're like fancy vampires. And then we have wares, which are basically werewolves. And the humans and the vampires had this sort of alliance going for a really long time, but then the humans decided to call that off. They didn't want to do that anymore, but now they are kind of starting to form an alliance with the werewolves, and they know, the vampires know, because they have the smallest population out of all 3, that if the humans and the werewolves pair up and they decide to take the vampires out, they could very easily do so. So they're getting a little bit nervous. So now they have come up with this plan to have a vampire marry one of the werewolves, and then this vampire bride is going to go and live with the werewolves for a year to prove that it's safe for vampires to be around werewolves, is essentially the whole entire idea. But we have our main character whose name is Misery, and she is a vampire, but she has not been living with them. Like, she got away from the vampire world. She didn't want to live there anymore, so she kind of changed some things about her appearance and changed her name, and then she went to live in disguise in the human world, but she gets summoned back, and her father is like this really high like councilman with the vampires, and he basically tells her like, you know, we're gonna send you to go marry this werewolf. And at first she's like, no, I'm not gonna do it, but then she finds out the werewolf's name and she's like, okay, I'll do it, because it's a really long explanation. But when she was living in the human world, she had her little corporate 9 to 5, not really 9 to 5, because she could only go there at night. Don't ask me, but she had some corporate little office job, and she had a roommate who was a human, and this little human roommate of hers went missing at one point and was never found again, obviously never seen again. But when she did all of her deep digging and research into what could have happened, she found this journal where her friend wrote the name of this werewolf. So now she thinks obviously there is some connection there. So she agrees to the marriage so that she can go into the werewolf land, and she'll be living with this guy that she believes has some sort of part in the disappearance of her friend. So there are a lot of different things going on here, clearly. It's a very interesting blend of like the whole fantasy vampires and werewolves, but it's also like in a modern world. Like I said, she's got her little office job. She does like tech stuff with computers. So that is very interesting. The timeline has kind of jumped around a little bit so far. We started off on the wedding day, and then we jumped back to like 6 weeks before then when she got summoned, and then we went back to her present day, and then we went back to her first arriving there. So it's kind of jumping around a little bit, but so far she has arrived at this place and she has met one of the other werewolves, and they were basically like, don't talk to anybody, don't go anywhere, like don't do anything. And she was like, okay, cool. So now she is just living in this house of this guy that she is married to, who is a werewolf, and he is the alpha of his pack. I really don't know if this book will be for me, but it's interesting enough so far. I will say that the main character, and reading from her perspective, it really feels the same as reading from any other like female character in an Ali Hazelwood book. Obviously the characters are very different. This is a totally different world, but the narration style of it all is very, very similar to other Ali Hazelwood books that I've read before. And I'm not complaining, because I do enjoy Ali Hazelwood. I like that her books are so fun and just quick and light and easy to read, but it's just very interesting, that sort of narration style in this story. So we'll see how it goes. I'm very interested in this like subplot with her like missing human friend and how that comes into play. Obviously, we're gonna get some romance between her and this like alpha male. Anyway, don't have a lot to say about it so far. Am interested in the story, and I'll let you guys know further thoughts if I do have further thoughts. So I am quite a ways through Bride now, on page 316. So I've got like 80 pages until the end. So I just wanted to stop and give you guys a little bit of an update. It's very interesting. The last book I read was Feybound, which was, I said, more fantasy than romance, even though it's like marketed as a fantasy romance or romantasy. This one is definitely the opposite, where it's way more romance than it is fantasy. Like, they're just in a fantasy world, and there are some like, I don't know, fantasy aspects of it, like with this whole alliance between the vampires and the weres, and they don't want to start a war and all that, but really the book is focused on the romance. Once again, I do feel like it feels like every other Ali Hazelwood romance book, and I don't know if it's just because like I just recently read Love on the Brain a couple weeks ago. I don't know if that's why I'm like, I feel like this is like the same thing. The characters themselves are very different, but like I said, like the writing style, the narration of it all, and a lot of like the actual scenes between the two of them are very reminiscent of other Ali Hazelwood books. Once again, I'm not hating on that because like I do enjoy her books. It's just like, this is an Ali Hazelwood book. There's a lot of like spicy scenes in here. And the one, I am currently stopped in the middle of a spicy scene. And it was starting to make me a little bit uncomfortable because it was very much like his wolfness is very prominent in the scene that is occurring right now. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. Another thing I'll say though is it's like extremely predictable. Like from page 1, I was like, oh, this is gonna happen. Maybe it's like, I shouldn't say it's predictable because we know going into it it's gonna be a romance between these two, but like, there was this big thing that for the entirety of the book, up until a couple of pages ago, it was like we were supposed to believe something else, but like no, it was like, who believed that? Because it was literally like the first page, I was like, oh, so this is what's going on. And then they just tell us like a couple of pages ago. Like I said, I'm over 300 pages in, so 300 pages they were trying to kind of make us believe something else, but I don't really know who would believe the other thing. I don't know. It just seems very, very obvious with the plot where everything is going. I'm very, very curious because we still have the subplot going of like her missing friend, and they have made very, very little progress with that. Like most of the book has been like romance and like spicy scenes, which is fine if that's what you're into, but like I want to know more about the subplot, and they haven't really made a lot of discoveries with that. And then there's a lot of different things going on with like the politics of it all, and like the council of the vampires, and then like the pack with the weres, and it just makes me think like where it's gonna go at the end. And I don't know, like I don't think this is gonna be a series, but it almost feels like things are setting up in order to end and have a second book, but I don't think that's what's going on. So it just has me very curious how the book is going to end in the next 80 pages, where it's going to go, and how everything is going to be resolved. Overall, it's okay. Like, I'm not hating it, but I'm not like super ecstatic about it. I didn't think that I was going to really love it going into it. Not that I was expecting to hate it, but like I even said, I don't know if this will be my type of book, but I wanted to give it a try anyways because I have enjoyed Ali Hazelwood, and now I am getting a little bit more into fantasy. I used to be very scared to read fantasy until a couple of months ago, and I read fantasy for the first time. So now I am opening up a little bit more to the genre. Anyway, with all of that being said, I am about to starve to death, so I'm gonna go make some food, finish my book tonight, and I will let you guys know my final thoughts when I have them. So I was just about to give you guys an update on the next book that I had started, and I just realized that I never did a final update for Bride by Ali Hazelwood. So let's get that out of the way. I kept flip-flopping between wanting to give it a 2-star or a 3-star, and I was initially leaning towards a 3-star because I was like, well, it's not for me, but like maybe other people will like it. It's not a genre that I read a lot, so like I don't know you know, what's good in that genre, what's bad in that genre, and I'm like, I don't know if it's objectively a bad book, but I'm landing on a 2.5 star for that one. I know in the last clip I talked about the direction some of the spicy scenes were going, and I wasn't really vibing with that. Definitely was not for me. There was a lot of sexual content at the very end of the book, and a lot that I was not comfortable with, and I know that that is a type of smut that a lot of people enjoy. Things with animals. Me, I don't get it. I don't know why you would want to read that, and I personally don't want to read it. It was very, very uncomfortable. I'm going to be scarred by that book for life. But aside from that part of it, I feel like this is marketed as a romance, and that's what I put it on my TBR as, is a romance. But the plot also like focuses a lot on the other things going on, like the politics in this world, and then also like the side plot with the like main character's missing friend. So a lot of time is spent on that, and I feel like not as much time was spent on the romance as there should have been in a romance book. It kind of felt like a book where you're just rooting for their romance because it's a romance book and that's what you're told to root for. But the characters, I feel like, weren't really giving that much. Like, there wasn't a lot of time spent on the development of this romance, especially the male main character. I feel like I didn't really see a lot of his personality coming through. The female main character, like, a little bit more I could relate or, like, connect to. But the male main character, like, he was just there as the love interest, and I didn't really get a lot of personality from him. And I feel like just the pacing or the development of their relationship was not what you would expect from like a romance book. Like, it's kind of like nothing at all, and then all of a sudden escalates to whatever the heck happened at the end. So as a romance book, I don't really think it was that great of a romance. We're just gonna leave it there. It was definitely not my type of book. I was not expecting it to be my type of book, but I don't know if it's like really a good book in general, despite the genre and despite my like personal taste. I have decided that I much prefer Ali Hazelwood's other romance books, not so much the supernatural fantasy vibe of this one. Moving on though, from Bride, I started today Among the Living by Tim Levin, which is a horror book. This so far is just like okay. The first chapter started off really, really strong and like pulled me straight into the story, and I love when a horror book, especially a horror book, brings you straight into the action and doesn't spend so much time like setting things up, but the setup and the backstory and everything is like interwoven in the story. So the first chapter starts off with this group of people. They are on this island and they're going to discover or like explore this cave system there. And the island that they are on was previously like a really frozen, very cold, like desolate land. There was permafrost in the ground that had frozen through like this whole cave system. Now, because of like climate change and everything, things are starting to melt and finally go away to a point where they can go in and explore it. So this is pretty much like untouched territory. This group of people goes to cave systems that are not well known because they want to harvest like certain things within the rocks in the cave system. So what they do is they go in and they find these minerals that they're looking for. They harvest enough to give them a good pay, and then they sell the information and the location to like bigger corporations so they can come in and mine for this material. So that's where we start off in the first chapter. We're following them through this cave, and I thought it was so good and so eerie and so creepy because like, first of all, just the idea of like going caving in general is not for me. I don't understand how people do that. And then also just like, because you know they're gonna find something in there, but you don't know what it is. I feel like the suspense and just like the creepy feeling was so good in that first chapter. Then in the second chapter, we get introduced to this other group of people, and they are like activists, very for conservation, against climate change and like trying to fix that, and pretty much like everything that this first group of people is doing, like they are totally against that and want to put a stop to it. So they get tipped off that this group is here exploring this cave system, so they are following them out there to I don't know, confront them, try to stop them in some way. And they encounter this group outside of the cave, and they are freaking out because they're like, something is off here. We saw something crazy down there, and now one of the members from our group is missing and is still in the cave system. So I don't want to give too much away. I know we're still pretty early on in the book. I don't know if I ever said I'm 30% of the way through right now. We're still pretty early on, but I don't know how much is really a spoiler. I didn't read the synopsis. I don't know how much the synopsis tells you, but I don't want to give away too much information. So far right now, I am like not understanding a lot of the decisions that they're making. Like they're very much like really dumb, like horror movie decisions where they're like, oh no, this cave is like so scary and somebody died, but like let's go back in it. Like, now why would you do that? I also am not really connecting with the characters so far. Once again, we are getting like some backstory and like flashbacks and things interwoven within the chapters of the present. So we're getting to know the characters a little bit more as we go along. But right now, they're really not giving a lot. There's also a lot of characters. I think there's like 6 or 7 that we are following. So it is a lot to keep track of. There is an interesting dynamic because obviously the two groups are working for 2 different things. But then one member from one group and one member from another group have this like past where they were like close to each other, and that's still unfolding. So it'll have like an interesting dynamic and like tension between the two, but I don't know where the story's gonna go from here. Obviously they're gonna end up back in the cave somehow. Don't know why, because I would have gotten my car and left like 3 chapters ago, so I don't know why they're still there. That's where we are so far. I'm gonna keep reading this and let you guys know how it goes from here. It's time for another update. I am now 57% through Among the Living. I think I have like 120 pages or so left. It is still not doing very much for me. We are getting a little bit more like backstory to the characters so you can connect with them a little bit more, but it's definitely one of those stories that like I feel like whether it's a book or a movie, like this type of story has those characters that exist just to die. We start off the book with 7 characters, but we really only get like a deeper connection to 2, sort of 3 of them. So you kind of know in the back of your head that the other 4 characters are like just there to die. And it has so far been following that like timeline. There also really hasn't been a lot going on. I know in my last clip I said like, oh, they're gonna go back into the cave because I thought that's what the book was about, but that is not true. They get out of the cave that one time, and now they are hiking to like this town, and it's gonna be like a 3-day hike or so. One of them is injured and they have very limited supplies because of something that happened while they were still at the cave. But basically, the thing that they encountered in the cave, they are scared that it's like some ancient disease like coming up after all the permafrost has melted, and humans have never been exposed to it, so they don't know what it's going to do, how contagious it will be, and they don't want to go back to like civilization right away in order to prevent the spread of this possible disease that they've all encountered. So that is why they are choosing to take this really long route to hike it out, but obviously things are not going well with very limited supplies. There's a lot of tension within the group. We are getting more of like the backstory and those 2 characters specifically that knew each other in the past. But other than that, like it's really not doing much. The first chapter, like I said, was so good. Like it pulled me right in. We had some horror, like a glimpse of horror, a little kind of allusion to the unknown and this like ominous feeling, and then we got the 2 groups coming together, and now it's just kind of like drama between the group and like the tensions between the group. And then the last chapter that I just read had another like horror scene in it, so that was over 50% of the way through. But I'm hoping that means that the last half is going to pick up with like the horror and the action and the suspense and the thrill of it all, because it really has not been doing a lot for me. Also, as far as like the horror aspect goes, like I don't feel like I fully understand like what this thing is that they have encountered and what it can do, but I feel like that also might be for a reason. Like maybe we're supposed to be just as blind as the characters, but like it's just not doing a lot for me because I don't understand, like I don't know. I just don't feel scared. I want to feel scared, and I don't feel scared. I feel like recently everything that I've been reading has been just very like meh, like really 3-star reads. It also doesn't help that I'm currently reading another book at the same time as this one. I'm reading this on my Kindle, obviously, and then I'm reading a physical book, and that one is really shaping up to be a 1-star read, and I'm like hating it so much. And I don't know if like my negative feelings towards that book is like hindering my experience with this book, but this one still isn't doing that much for me. Like, I want more horror, I want more crazy things, I want to be scared, I want the suspense, and I'm just not getting it. I don't really care about the characters. Like, I'm not rooting for them because I don't really care about them, and I hate that. So we'll see where the last half goes. Hopefully it gets better from here. Hopefully things go up and is much more high stakes from here, but we will see. That's it for now. Obviously there is a lot of like environmental like horrors coming in, obviously, like with climate change. I don't think it's ever explicitly said, maybe in the synopsis, but this does take place like in the near future, I believe. Hopefully that's not a lie, but they were like talking about, they saw a polar bear and they were like, oh yeah, polar bears like used to be like this and then this happened to them, because one of the characters like didn't know what a polar bear was. So obviously I feel like that hints to the fact that this is not in our present day timeline in the real world. But there's obviously a lot of things happening with climate change and like sinkholes opening up and like methane explosion things happening. So there is like environmental horrors, but I want more like horror and this like thing that they found in the cave. I want more of that because it's fascinating to me, but it's not happening enough. So I'm back with some updates. First of all, I finished Among the Living and I'm not sure what to rate it yet. The second half definitely was a lot better than the first half. I feel like there was a lot of horror, a lot of action, the suspense really picked up, and I did really end up enjoying it. But I feel like this type of story, like, it's very easy to predict where the plot will go, and I definitely did predict like what was gonna happen and just the progression of things. And I don't know if it's because I read so much horror or I read a lot of stories like this that I can kind of guess what the timeline will follow, but this definitely did everything that I expected it to. Like, it didn't go anywhere crazy or anywhere shocking, at least in terms of what I personally read. Once again, the writing style, like, it wasn't bad by any means. It was good, it was enjoyable, but it didn't do anything crazy. It's not anything to really rant or rave about, like, oh, it was so beautifully written and so well written. Like, it was just okay. The story overall, I feel like, was just okay. There was a lot of horror things, a lot of horror elements that came into play in the second half that I really enjoyed. Overall, I would recommend this. Like, I don't feel anything negative towards this book at all. I would recommend it to people that are a fan of like horror that has to do with like sort of some action, some suspense, things with like evil or ancient like creatures or evil ancient like horrors awakening, anything that has to do with like disease or infection. And if you enjoy stories where there's like a lot of tension between a group of people and then also like sort of a survival element within it, then I think this could be one that you enjoy. I really like the ending of this as well, but like I said, I kind of saw it coming because I've read so many stories that are similar to this. Overall, I think I'm gonna give it like a 3. I don't know, I'm torn between a 3 or a 3.5 because I feel like a lot of people view a 3 as like a negative rating when it's not. I feel like a 3 is just like average, and for me this book was like average. Like I said, it didn't go into any shocking or crazy territory and do anything that I wasn't expecting, but I did enjoy it. And then I'm thinking about it and I'm like, well, I probably would recommend this more than some of the other books that I've rated 3 stars, so maybe for that reason I should go with a 3.5. I'm not entirely sure yet, but would I recommend it? Yes. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Was it my favorite thing ever? No. Did it do anything crazy? No. With that out of the way, I started the next book and the last book for this video, The House of Last Resort by Christopher Golden. I like how I made sure that it was upright just to show you the cover that doesn't have the title on it. It's on the spine here because I don't have the dust jacket on. I am 60 pages through this right now, so we really have just gotten the setup of this story. We have this couple, I think his name is Tommy and her name is Kate. I believe. Okay, her name is definitely Kate, and his name is Tommy. Wow, I remembered the characters' names. Can we be proud? Anyway, they were living in the US, but Tommy has family that lives in Sicily, and they decide to move there because basically there is this like old, like dying town, and the mayor is like ready to do anything to revive the town. So he kind of makes this thing where he says these houses are open to anybody from anywhere to come, and they can buy it for €1, but they have to stay there for 5 years, and they have to put like 50,000 euros in renovations into the house or something. So of course, this couple were following, and a lot of other people have taken up this offer because it does sound like a really good offer. And Tommy, having family, his grandparents live there, it just seems like a really good opportunity for them. So they have gotten into their new house. It is this like big stone house that's kind of like on the edge of a cliff. All the houses are like up this mountain with this very narrow, windy mountain road. The houses are really, really close together, and a lot of them are empty, obviously, but it's just like very small town vibes. Like everyone is kind of friendly to one another, and things are seemingly pleasant. But when they get there, Tommy's grandmother comes to visit, and she is not reacting the way that they expected. They thought she would be stoked, obviously, because they are going to be living near her, but when she sees the specific house that they're in, she is immediately like very short with them, and like very, not entirely angry, but you can definitely tell that there's something bothering her, and she's saying like this, you shouldn't be in this house, don't have children in this house, like you should not be in this house, this is not the house that's right for you. And our couple is very confused by that, but they have just made a discovery of this like little secret door that leads to some weird rooms in the back of the house. So I think things are going to start progressing from here. This is a lot shorter than I thought it was. I thought it was like 350 pages, but it's only about 290, so I'm hoping it'll go by pretty quickly. I am enjoying it so far. One thing that's funny to me though is I went on Goodreads to see the reviews, and there were a lot of people giving it low reviews because they were like, I'm just not really a fan of like the like whole like demon religious horror type of thing. And I'm like, so why did you pick this book up when the book like synopsis literally mentions that like this house used to be a cathedral or something, and like priests used to be in there and doing weird shit? I'm like, why did you pick the book up when the synopsis says that it's gonna have religious undertones if you are not vibing with that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not religious, but I love me a good like demon exorcism story. So we'll see where this goes. I'm gonna keep reading it tonight. I absolutely love the colors on this hardback. It's so gorgeous. But I will see you guys when I have another update. I just made it to part 2 in the book, which is called October Below, and it's just about halfway through. So you would think now would be the perfect time to do an update. So this is my update, but not quite an update because I really don't have anything to say. I'm enjoying it so far. Some creepiness has just started. I have some thoughts about where the story will go, where I hope the story will go, and I am really enjoying it so far. And that's all I have to say at this point. I'm very curious to see where things will go in the second part. The couple has just learned some things about their home that they were not made aware of before purchasing it. And just some weird things are happening. So it's going well. I hope the creepiness factor really gets ramped up in the second half, and I will let you guys know if I have any further thoughts on it. I am just really enjoying it, and that's all I have to say. So I have finished the last book for this video, The House of Last Resort. I don't know if this happens to you guys, but this was one of those books for me where I read it and I enjoyed it and I gave it 5 stars, but I have absolutely nothing to say about it afterwards. I don't know how to explain it. This year I've been really challenging myself to leave actual written reviews for every single book that I read on Goodreads. So whether it's like a short review or a really long one, just try to leave some sort of written review. And this one, I am like, I couldn't do it because I was like, I don't know what to say about this book. One thing I will say about myself is that I have learned that I really enjoy possession horror. Once again, even though I'm not religious, I don't know why. I just like really enjoy the idea of like possession, demonic possession is so freaky to me, and I think it's a really good opportunity to create some really horrific imagery within the story. So this was the type of horror that I enjoy. One thing that I will say about it is I really like the setting of it. The way that the author describes this really small town that they're in, the way all the houses look and how they're all kind of crumbling and falling apart, and they're up on this hillside, and it's just really small town, and it's really sunny and warm all the time. Like, he set the scene perfectly. I could picture everything, and I think you did a really, really good job in that sense. I did enjoy the horror elements. I enjoyed the way that things ended. And I would recommend this to other people that like this type of horror. If you like demon stories and exorcism stories and possession stories, then I would recommend it. Obviously, if you're not a fan of any of those things, then you probably shouldn't read this book because that is what it focuses on. Anyway, with that being said, like I said, this is the last book for this video. I plan to do like one of these little reading vlogs every quarter or so and just read the new releases on my TBR as they come out. So there may be some books in these reading vlogs that I have previously talked about in like my monthly wrap up or whatever, just because I'm reading them as they come out. Like I said, these are kind of just going to be like little bonus vlogs for each quarter. So with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time.